If you're listening on a speakerphone, we recommend you mute your line to prevent audio quality issues. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please enter them in the questions box. We depend on your feedback to make our webinars the best they can be. Please take a moment to complete the survey at the end of the webinar. Finally, a recording of this presentation will be posted on genetric.com in the Ideas section. Today's presenter is David Sturtz, Digital Strategy Director here at Genetric. He has over 10 years experience helping leading healthcare brands with their online marketing. He has tackled digital marketing challenges from all sides, from consulting on digital strategy, to designing user-friendly information architectures, to building content management software that powers hundreds of websites. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to David.
All right, thanks, Alex. Excited to be talking today about SEO again, and really excited to kind of geek out about metadata and take a little bit of a deep dive into some of the current trends around metadata, how all of that is coming together and what the search engines are doing today. This is a topic that we put together based on some requests we had from earlier webinars. A lot of times we don't have a lot of time to dig into some of the deeper specific issues within SEO. There's such a broad range of things that fall into that topic. We really wanted to spend some extra time today just talking about metadata, talking about schema.org and Open Graph and some social metadata as well. So it's really time to put on your nerd glasses today. Hopefully we won't get too far in the weeds or too geeky with all the stuff we're talking about. Really want to make sure that this is going to be useful to everyone, but fair warning, it is just a little bit more detailed than we normally get in some of these conversations, which I think is going to be fantastic today. So what are we going to talk about? The first topic today, we're going to talk a little bit about what search engines want and some of the principles that are guiding the overall direction that search engines are headed and what they're looking for that can help you to kind of vet some of your strategies against, so that you can take a look at what you're trying to do, understand where search engines are looking to head and what they're trying to do and how all of that fits together. So we're going to look at that both in terms of what they're trying to do today, as well as where search is evolving to, and try to understand where things like schema.org fit into that whole evolution of search. We're going to look specifically at schema.org and how that connects into the search engines, how that connects to the data that you as a healthcare marketer are trying to present online, and really understanding what does all of this mean. I have a feeling that's why most people are on the webinar today, is really trying to understand what is this topic that I keep hearing about, what does that mean for my healthcare organization, for my marketing efforts, and how do I kind of get started with this and wrap my head around what's going on there. That's really what we're hoping to accomplish today. We're also going to take a quick look at some social metadata that is still really relevant today and understand what that lay of the land looks like there. And at the end of the day, the goal here is for you to understand some of these concepts, understand what options are out there and maybe some of the trade-offs that are involved. The goal, this is not the webinar for the how to step-by-step implement any one of these schema types on your website today, but really trying to make some good decisions about where you're headed with your SEO efforts and making sure that those are aligned with where search engines are at and where they're headed. So with that, I wanted to mention a few common challenges that we see in healthcare SEO, and this is as healthcare organizations are trying to optimize their sites. I think some of the common challenges that at least I see looking out there across those sites center around metadata, and some of the topics we're talking about today can really be a fix for some of the problems that are out there. So the first really is around just metadata completeness and consistency. Are there the right metadata elements out there on each page? Are they filled out consistently? Are they used to maximum effect? That is just kind of the baseline, and that's a huge challenge when you have hundreds or thousands of pages on a site to maintain that sort of consistency. I think site structure and internal linking is one of the things that maybe gets a little bit overlooked in terms of healthcare organizations. Again, these are larger sites, really thinking about how the site is put together, focusing that both around user experience and around search engine optimization is a important consideration. And then the third thing that jumped to mind really is the internal competition. So as healthcare organizations have gotten bigger, have gone through all of the mergers and acquisitions, or are going through those today, there's so many different branches and tentacles out there in the world that you end up with a lot of overlap, different service lines that have clinics or overlapping institutions that have different versions of the same services, and as a the larger system, you end up cannibalizing some of those results or some of that rank across your own system. And so some of the structures that we'll look at today can help you to sort that out and maybe think through and tie that back to the overall information architecture of your site and understand maybe some ways of breaking up those topics, breaking up that content that could help to reduce some of that some of those situations where you're competing with yourself, and maybe take advantage of some other situations where you don't have the content out there that would be useful. So with that, let's think a little bit about what search engines want. And I hear a lot that SEO is constantly changing, which it is. There's something new happening pretty much every day in that field. It's hard to keep on top of. That can be a real challenge for people, and I think some people just kind of turn off and feel like they can't even almost keep up with it, so they don't really know where to start. So I wanted to kind of bring it back to thinking about what search engines really want, what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that has remained true for a very long time, what exactly they're trying to accomplish. And that can help to guide your efforts and make sure that you're not necessarily responding to the trend of the day, but thinking about a little bit longer term strategy. So Google in their own documentation says their first priority is to help our users find relevant, engaging answers for their search queries. So that is pretty much what search engines are up to today. They're trying to be that answer engine to help users find an answer to a particular question. What do they need in order to do that? The first piece of that is great content, and you'll hear this said a lot. The number one thing you can do for SEO is really focus on content, writing really solid, good content that is user-focused, that is answering those questions for people. And the ways that the search engines tend to think about what is great content relate back to how they're going to get access to that, how they're going to make that available to their users, and how they're going to know if that's good or not. And so you want to think about, is it crawlable? This is where a lot of technical SEO comes in, kind of the server setup configurations, robots.txt files, things like that. Can the search engines get to it? How easy is it for a spider to go through your site, find all of the content, and retrieve that? We see even things like that page response time for the spider can be a factor in how frequently your site gets indexed. So it can be very, very detailed there, but the principle is, the easier it is for the search engine to get through and request all the content on your site, the better job they're going to do at actually knowing what's there, what the content is that you're putting out. If you think about indexable, that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Is how can the search engine understand the content that's there? It used to be just really breaking up the words that were on the page, counting them up, and figuring out relevancy based on that. As you'll see today, there's a lot more different ways that search engines can go about indexing what that content is about and understanding that page and your site and the whole combination of that. And the third area is retrievable. So that's, when somebody goes to the search engine, types in a search, how well is the search engine able to match your content to the search query that the user entered? And that's what's going to get it returned. So this is where we think about maybe rank a little bit. Is it great content? Have other people vouched for it in terms of giving you links and sharing that content or clicking through it on the search engine's results page? That's going to help influence that as well. The other thing that search engines are looking for is a great user experience. They're trying to create a great user experience. And if you noticed something subtle in that quote from Google, they're trying to do this for their users. And so they're really focused on what is the experience of that searcher in terms of their Google experience. And so whatever you can do to help somebody have a better experience using Google to find an answer, that's really where that synergy comes from. So they're not necessarily in the business of sending people off to your site, although they definitely do that a little bit. But they're more and more in the business of getting that answer to that person and having them have a great experience in doing that. And so this is where you see things, ranking factors come into play, like page speed. If it takes a user a long time to load a page, once they click off of that Google result, they don't have a great experience. And a lot of times you see users bouncing back to that search results page. That's another ranking indicator that can really impact your site. This is also why you're seeing focus on things like accelerated mobile pages. You've probably noticed those in a lot of the news results on Google, things like recipes as well that are being served up through these AMP pages. They get a little icon there, and they're really built to appear very quickly. So that could be the topic of a whole other webinar, but just really speaks to that principle that Google and the other search engines are really trying to ensure that somebody has a good experience with them, is going to keep coming back to them when they have that next search, and retain those users over time. So hopefully this thought process gives you a little bit of a sense of, if you're trying to make a decision about, what are we going to do next with SEO, or you're making a change to the website, thinking about how does this impact the content and the ability of the search engine to interact with that content, and what is that experience going to be? Not somebody typing in our URL and landing on our homepage, but typing in a search query on a search engine, landing on any page within the site, and what is that experience looking like? Is that providing a good experience for the user? To think a little bit about where search engines are headed, I'd like to look back a little bit. I'm sure many of you can remember this was my favorite search engine back in the day, Alta Vista. This was kind of, as search started to get big, it was kind of a very literal search engine out there, looking at pages out there across this new internet thing and trying to find things that matched the keywords that you were putting into that search box. Pretty soon Google came along and was basically doing the same thing, but a little bit better, really took over that space there and started to change things a little bit. But at this point in time, we were still really focused on a few things, and a lot of that was basic web page metadata. So I want to just make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what that metadata looks like. And these things are still important. We'll talk about kind of where they're at today. Certainly they were very important back in those Alta Vista days, and that's where things went a little bit astray with keyword stuffing and some other crazy things that ended up happening and didn't work out very well. But these pieces of information are still within the web page today, and they're some of the basic foundation if you're looking to improve your search engine optimization. The first piece is the page title. This is the title HTML element that appears within the head section of the code, and this is what appears usually up in the top bar of a browser. This is also usually showing in the search engine results as that blue link that you're going to click on to be taken to that page. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it gets pulled from somewhere else, but most of the time that's what you're going to see there. The guideline for this is to keep it around 60 characters, usually under 60 characters. It's actually about 600 pixels is how most of the SEO folks are counting it now, based on the width of the display. And so if you've got wider characters like M's and W's versus skinnier characters like I's and L's, you might be able to squeeze more or less characters into that space on the search results page before it starts cutting it off on the right-hand side. The next item is the description. This is something you want to keep to about 160 characters, where the title is really, really important for getting your keywords out there, for making sure that that is a match to the user's search terms and query, and is going to be really clickable and enticing to that user. The description doesn't directly affect rank. Google has said that's the case. So as far as we know, it doesn't really directly affect the rank. The focus for the description is getting somebody to click on that result. So if Google chooses to display the description along with the page title in that results page, they may choose a different piece of the page to display alongside of that, but quite often they're using the description. You really want that to be an advertisement for your content and enticing people to click on that. Those clicks then actually can influence the rank. If you're frequently clicked on result within the page, that is something that could actually affect your rank. You want to avoid duplication across descriptions. You can see some of that in Google Search Console, which we'll talk about a little bit today, but that's something that will come up as kind of a red flag. And the description can also be used by social sites. So when we talk about social metadata, this is kind of a fallback for a lot of that metadata is the HTML meta description tag. The keywords tag, most people know was pretty much deprecated a number of years ago. People were just stuffing all kinds of useless keywords in there, and it just isn't something that the search engines are looking at today in any meaningful way. So unless that's really influencing your on-site search, which it does in many content management systems, it's for external, Google or Bing search, it's not something that really needs a lot of attention. Finally, I would argue that the URL itself of a page is basically a piece of metadata and is treated that way by Google. And so the path to the page that's in that URL, the different kind of folder structure or pieces of that URL that are assembled together to get that address to that web page are used as some ranking signals, both in terms of the depth of that page within the site, the length of that overall URL, the keywords that appear inside of that. And so that's really something to be thinking about. How are you describing the page using that URL? What does that URL say about how important this content is, where it lives, and what it's about? So that's kind of all of the old school stuff. And where this got us to is sort of that old school search engine approach, is looking for documents, putting in some keywords, trying to find back something that exists today that's out there, much like going to the library and trying to find the page in the book that mentions that topic that we're interested in. And this was really a lot of the focus for many years, was just getting more and more accurate at finding that document that existed, going out there and retrieving that, matching that to the user search query, finding the best, most popular, best rated page of that book and bringing that back. Where search engines are headed now is a little bit different. And Google especially is focusing on searching the real world. And so you'll hear people talk about entities, and that is any real person, place, thing that exists in the real world. And Google is trying to basically map all of that together. And rather than retrieving documents, where things are headed is towards giving search engines the ability to combine information on the fly and create answers that consumers are looking for. So the result that comes back on a search engine page may be something that doesn't actually exist in a single place, has never existed before that query was plugged into the search engine. So it's a really different way of thinking about the information that we're putting out there and how that may be used down the line by search engines. So it's just really starting to happen now, and we'll look at kind of the range of things that is happening out of this with Google in particular. If that's not quite clicking for you, this example might help a little bit, really illustrating the need for knowledge, not just pages, documents, information in that format. So if you go out and start typing in urgent care, Google is going to suggest for you, you might be looking for urgent care near me open late, near me Blue Cross. If you start breaking this down, these are really complicated queries. They're looking for some very specific information. You need to know a lot of different things. You need to know what an urgent care is, what type of businesses exist out there that would be considered urgent care locations. You need to know what near means, or near me, how close is, or what is the address for these different businesses, what is the address or location for the person that's doing the searching. In one of these examples, what is the address of the person's home? Piecing all of those things together, and then adding in another layer with something like open late. So understanding what late hours might be, and what are the hours of all of these different businesses. So you can imagine this may not be something that exists in a document today, that Google could just go retrieve from that library and put that in front of somebody. This is something that is more like a database query, something that would need to be assembled on the fly based on exactly where this person is searching from. There could be a giant list out there if you're right in the middle of Chicago and you're searching for this. Maybe somebody has bothered to put together a document with a list of those. If you're out in a more rural region, maybe that just doesn't exist. And so what Google is working towards doing is being able to assemble all of those pieces on the fly and really taking the user's search intent and all of these different factors, location, network location, into play as they pull together data that they've collected and information from across the web. And so as they're doing this, they're creating a map or a graph of entities. It's these real world people, places, and things, and the information about them. And they're really focusing on actionable information. You're probably not searching for urgent care near you just for information about where it exists, just in case you need that one day. Might be, probably you want to go visit that at some point. And so they're really focusing on what is that actionable information? How can somebody not only get a little bit of information back, but do something and take that next action. What this begins to look like is some big changes to the search results page. So we saw some of those historical screenshots, Google back in 1998, but this is kind of where things are headed today, and you've probably noticed a lot of these things popping up just within the last few months and year or so. So Google has a lot of different names for these different types of presentation within the search engine results page. Here are just a few of the things that are going on. So on the left, you've got pretty much the standard results. Each of those individual results displayed within there looks a little bit different whether you're on a mobile device or you're on a desktop device, exactly kind of how that's the design shows up. But we're pretty familiar with that. In the middle, you have rich snippets. So this is just the same results enhanced just a little bit more with things like those images, a little bit of information about those recipes. There must be a lot of searching on recipes because Google is really, really focused on that as a content type overall. I think it makes a really good test case for a lot of the things that they're doing. But you can see the stars and ratings down there on that peanut butter cookie recipe, things like that. So they're just enhancing those results that were already there. The next place that Google is taking this is to something they call rich cards. And so these are displayed in a little bit different way. So you can see this one happens to be a carousel towards the top of the page. You've got a little bit bigger image. It's very swipeable for mobile. You've got that carousel going on. But similarly, you've got some additional information showing up that is based on the type of content that you're looking at. You've got ratings and reviews in this case. You've got the approximate time it's going to take to cook that and who the publisher is for that information. So you can see they're pulling together a lot of very detailed and consistent information across this type of content. If you throw in a few other things that we see out there, you can see there's quite a bit of different things going on. So in addition to rich snippets right there in the middle, you've probably seen the featured snippets. So if you're towards the top of the organic search results, Google may pull a chunk of content out of your site and show that as a featured snippet, a little bit of a quote from the site that might answer a user's question, and then a link off to your site within that. So usually that's available to pretty much the first organic placement for that particular query. There's some other things going on there. The one on the right hand with George Washington is considered the knowledge graph panel. And this is a great example of where Google is starting to pull together that information from multiple different websites, present that in essentially a document inside of the search engine results page that has never existed before. So some of that information may be from Wikipedia, some of that may be from other websites. It's connecting all the dots together. You'll see for local businesses, it's pulling in social media, it's pulling in ratings and reviews, and combining that in a way that doesn't actually exist out there on a single website today. So these are all the different things that Google has going on. And I should take a moment here to say as well, this is subject to constant change. So there's really no guarantee if you're targeting one of these different types of appearance within the results that it's going to be there next week. I know as we were, beginning on the process of adding star ratings onto physician records within some of our client sites, Google had a bug that went out, and all of a sudden all the star ratings from everything disappeared. And so it just was a really good reminder that you just don't know. You go to this effort to put some of that stuff in place, and the next week things may change. You know, the week after that they fixed the bug, all of them popped back, and everything was working great. So just you're playing in Google's court with that. So the question then is really, how do we help Google get there? We see what they want to do. You know, they've got these beautiful snippets that they want to show. Obviously, that's really engaging for search engine users. It's going to get people into your content and really engaged with what you're doing there. How can we help Google achieve their goals and get what we want out of it as well? And this is where we get into talking about schema.org and really understanding how we can structure the information and the data within our own sites in a way that can help to fuel these types of searches that Google and other search engines are starting to really dig into. To give you a sense of what schema.org is, and it's kind of an awkward name, so a lot of times you'll hear it called schema. That's typically just a more generic word. It's technically called schema.org, and it's a group that Bing, Google, Yahoo, and Yandex put together starting back in about 2011 with the goal of creating and supporting a common set of schemas, the generic term, for structured data markup. So something that would be used on the web that is going to define different types of entities that can be used to describe the real world and can be extended. And so this is where this all comes from. So if you go out and explore the schema.org website and kind of get a sense of what's going on there, at the highest level, you'll see something called a thing. And this is the most generic type of item. So it has a few properties that pretty much anything you're going to represent on the web would have. From there, you get into some more specific kinds of things. And at the top level, you have these 8 types. So you have an action, a creative work, an event, something that's intangible, an organization, a person, place, or a product. And this is how it stands today. And then as you dig in deeper, you'll find much more detailed types within that. So this kind of gives you the lay of the land, that we're not just describing a web page, but we're describing something that exists in the real world. So the actual organization, you know, the actual business, the actual physical location, a place, or the actual person that is maybe part of that organization. And so these things start to connect together. Thinking about how this all connects together and how it connects together in healthcare, this is something that we've been talking about here at Genetric for a really long time. Creating connections among the specific kinds of content that are typical to healthcare websites. So you've got 3 big types of content. Typically in a healthcare website, you have information about the physicians, the care providers. You have information about the service offerings, all of the procedures and different service lines that are out there. And then you have information about where those services are offered at, the different facilities and contact points there. And so there's this triangle that we draw between them, making sure that all of those things flow. So if a potential patient comes in, they're looking for a physician, they may also have a procedure in mind that they're looking for that physician to perform. They're going to want to know where that's going to happen at and really understand the entire picture that's going to be involved in their care. So we've done this for years within our VitalSite CMS, connecting the dots with our smart panels, making related doctors show up next to service line content and attaching their locations as well, and doing all of that dynamically. Schema.org can do a very similar thing and gets pretty detailed in how it does it as well. So thinking about these healthcare examples, we'll start with a hospital. And within schema.org, a hospital is considered a thing, as everything is. It's also considered a place. It inherits some of the properties of being a place, so it exists in a physical location. It's considered a local business. So that is, you know, going to have certain properties that come with it that you can interact with it. It's going to have hours of operation, for example, because it's considered a business. And it's considered an organization. So it has employees, it has all of the things that an organization would have. So as you lump all of these pieces together, you get this aggregated thing called a hospital. And then the hospital type brings its own unique pieces to the puzzle as well. So one of the things that a hospital has is an available service, and the types of service that are available at a hospital are things like medical procedures, medical therapies, and medical tests. And that is unique or fairly unique to the hospital type. So you may have something that is a thing, a place, a local business, an organization that is a car dealership. They're not going to have available services that are medical procedures, medical therapies. They're going to have other types of services available that are specific to car dealerships. So thinking this a little bit further along, as you look into medical procedure, if we're going to follow that along, a medical procedure has a property that is a relevant specialty. So what specialty is relevant to that particular medical procedure? If I'm thinking about a hip replacement surgery, having an orthopedic specialty associated with that makes a lot of sense. And so we have that medical specialty. Some of these types are built in, especially as you get into the medical and healthcare side of things, built in to tie into other coding languages as well. And so that's where things get really interesting about integrating some of this data that may be published out as part of your content into other systems, down the road as we think into patient education materials, things inside of patient portals and other engagement. There's a lot of opportunity to connect the dots even further out into other sources of data. So that said, as we think medical specialty, we're going to bring in our other big entity here, the physician. And similar to a hospital, it's a thing, it's a place, it's a local business and an organization. And that takes a little bit of thinking, because when we think about physicians, we tend to think of them as people, but in the schema sense, this is really a business. This is, the business of that physician's individual kind of practice, and so it kind of tweaks the way that you think about it a little bit. It takes a little bit maybe to get your head wrapped around that, but an important consideration because the person, the physician, are kind of two different things in a way. One of the things that's unique to a physician is they can accept new patients. And so that's a property that you can actually define within the physician, whether they're accepting new patients or not. So you can start to see how if you're able to pull this back as Google, you can start to do some really interesting things. If you connect that physician's medical specialty the same way, you can connect that medical procedure as an available service of that physician, and you connect the hospital affiliation of that physician altogether, you can start to pull together some really interesting things and connect the data in some very interesting ways. So this is also something I mentioned towards the beginning. One of the challenges in healthcare is a lot of internal competition. You've got content out there and things don't have clean separation sometimes, especially when you're coming from that internal perspective. As you start to model the real world in this way, you can start to separate some of those concerns out. And so if you start to think about, the hospital versus the medical procedure versus the specialty, and thinking about content in that way and trying to shape things a little bit differently, that could help to differentiate among maybe some of the pages or content items within your site, as well as some of the strategies of how you're trying to target this hospital A versus hospital B, and kind of trying to avoid some of that internal competition or cannibalization of your search results. So hopefully this example helps to make it a little bit more clear what we're talking about when we talk about entities and the relationships among entities, and what exactly we're trying to do here with schema.org, the level of information and detail that we're trying to communicate to Google, and the usefulness of that in all of those relationships. Something that should be said as well is that not all of this content has to live within a single website. And so there are a lot of ways within Schema to reference content that is off on another site or to match things together. So as we get a little deeper in, we'll talk about same as. That's a way to say that a particular entity is the same as an entity mentioned on a different piece of web content on a different site. And down the road as this builds up, there's a lot of ability then to say, reference that medical specialty, connect that to a lot of different sources of information, and really have a single, a clear sense of how important that piece of content that maybe is talking about a medical specialty is. So if you've got a lot of physicians referencing that, if you have a lot of medical procedures referencing that, you can kind of see how that becomes a very important piece of content. how do we actually make this happen? What are the steps that it takes to get this onto your website and being picked up by the search engines? This is where things get, this is about as nerdy as we're going to get today. This is where things get a little bit nerdy and a little bit confusing, potentially. There are multiple approaches to schema.org. So schema.org really defines those things you saw on the last slide, all of those different entity types and what properties they have. There are multiple different ways to actually describe that, different languages essentially to use to describe that to the search engines and to the different services that are indexing that data. And there are pros and cons to each of them, and you know, a little bit of different direction that's going on with each of them as well. So on the left here, you can see there's an approach for publishing separate data. And this uses a JavaScript format called JSON-LD. That stands for JavaScript Object Notation for Linked Data. So it's just a way within the JavaScript language to define an object, a programmatic object, that represents links between different kinds of data. So here you can see an example. All three of these code examples at the bottom are describing the entity type of a website. And they all have basically the same thing going on, the name of your website name, an alternate name that might be in there, and the URL of the website. So Google has really strongly put themselves behind the JSON-LD format. They really like this one. This is what they're recommending whenever possible. They recommend it very strongly across their documentation. And in fact, although they support some of the other formats, it seems like recently they have removed some of that documentation from their site as far as how to actually implement things like microdata or RDFA, even though they may pick that up when they're crawling the page. So they are very seriously headed down the path of JSON-LD and kind of bringing everybody along with them. One of the reasons they may be doing that, this is me reading between the lines here, is that Bing seems to be more firmly back in the microdata and RDFA side of things. Those are fairly well supported across different types that Bing supports, where JSON-LD is really not there yet. So I don't know if that's fueling the choice of Google to push forward with a newer format and create a competitive advantage there, or exactly what's driving all of that. But in any case, on the right-hand side, you have those two types, microdata and RDFA. That's a resource description framework, is RDF. And those are just some different standard ways of basically like marking up this information. And both of these have in common that they are ways of annotating HTML markup. So you have the markup in the page already, you add some attributes or some other information onto those tags that you already have in your page, and that tells the search engine what kind of information that tag is containing. So here, rather than having a completely separate set of information published within the page, you're using information that already exists in the markup and just describing it in a little more detail. So in the microdata example, you have the item scope. That means everything inside of this element is an item, and the item type, we're specifying it's describing a website according to that schema.org/website. And then you see that item prop equals name as an attribute there on the title. So it's really assigning some additional properties onto each of the HTML tags that are already existing and matching those back into the schema standard. So same thing going on basically with RDFA, where it's using that existing markup, or it's using HTML markup and just adding some attributes in order to tell the search engine exactly what this markup means in a more detailed way. So pros and cons to this approach, or which way should you go with this? It's a little bit of trying to understand what you're trying to do. Obviously Google is kind of that 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. That's going to be the one that you want to focus on getting a lot of the results from. If there's an opportunity to support both, you can actually have both JSON-LD and microdata going on the same page at the same time. They're not exclusive in any way. It can be a lot more headache to maintain and can add to the overall page weight if there's a lot of content going on there. That's actually one of the downsides of JSON-LD. If you're publishing a long page, you can imagine duplicating all of that content back into a second instance where it's in that JSON LD format can add to the overall length of the code of the page. So that's a little bit of a downside there, but it's a lot easier. It works a lot better programmatically, I think, for Google to reliably get that information out of the page. So not making it necessarily a strong recommendation one way or another on which way to go. Hopefully Bing kind of ups their game here pretty soon with JSON LD and goes that direction. That makes it a little bit simpler. But definitely if you're looking at implementing this, do some digging into Google's docs, into Bing's documentation, look at the schema.org site, and maybe do some searching around too into some of the SEO forums and just trying to understand, okay, where are things at today? Because that changes week to week as well. Again, going back to the example of the ratings and reviews on physicians, as we were going through the process very early on of implementing that, we were doing that initially in the JSON LD format because Google was recommending that. And it turned out they hadn't yet implemented that, went back into the microdata format for that, and like a week later they came back and added support for JSON LD. So constantly changing as far as which things are available and which are probably the most up to date. So you really have to know what you're trying to do and kind of work backwards into that. Another piece of data here that may give you some guidance as far as which direction to go. This is a comparison based on the Common Crawl, which is a big crawler set of data that's done periodically, sort of like a census of the web in a way, looking at a huge data set, millions of pages out there across millions of sites, and looking at how many of them were using different types of structured data. So I pulled out the three that we're talking about: microdata, JSON LD, and RDFA. And you can see that across the board, there's much more microdata being published out at the end of last year when this was last run versus the year before. So huge growth in this overall. But you can see the growth in JSON LD really outpacing the other two types, and certainly RDFA kind of not growing nearly as fast as anything else. So maybe that gives you a little bit of guidance of where to focus some of that effort out there. JSON LD is definitely catching up to microdata, and with Google's support behind it, seems likely to pass that very quickly. So I wanted to talk as well about, out of all of the dozens or hundreds of schema.org entities, which ones would you want to start looking at as a healthcare marketer? Which things are going to be most useful, most likely to be useful? And we'll talk through each of these and just what they can do for you and why you might want to be looking at those. So these are the broad type of organization. So this is where you might find something like hospital as a medical organization type, hospital type within that. Number two here is website. So this is great. Any website should pay attention to that, as well as some elements like breadcrumbs and site navigation element that we'll look at as well. Videos, if you're doing videos, there's some reasons we'll talk about that's important. Local business information, this is where you can get medical business, physician, medical clinic, a lot of the things that we're trying to market on a day-to-day basis. Reviews are obviously becoming a more and more important thing within healthcare, and events are a pretty common marketing strategy in healthcare as well, and so that's something that's worth taking a look at. There are a lot of other things, and I've pulled these out of Google's rich snippets and rich card examples as ones that you're going to get something happening for you on Google out of this. So there are a few others that you might want to take a look at. Courses, if you're doing more like training courses rather than community events, might be something that you want to look at. It's one of the newer ones for having the full rich card experience happening within the search results page. Job postings tends to be a big one as well. A lot of times that's happening through your application tracking system, but something to be aware of. Podcasts seem to be getting really big within healthcare as they are everywhere. Google's doing more to incorporate those into search results, especially on mobile. And recipes, as we were talking about, is a huge area of content. If you're trying to be competitive there, it is a really competitive space, but thinking about how to mark those up would be something to look at as well. So thinking about organization, as far as some of those knowledge graph features or rich snippets that you can get there and really control through using the organization schema, this is where you can set the logo that appears in there. You can use the same as markup to indicate some of the social profiles that you want associated with your organization. And then contact point is another key area within this. So you can define a customer service phone number, a billing support phone number within there. And so you can kind of see on the right-hand side how some of those things show up within the search results page. So I know a lot of organizations struggle with business listing management and getting the right information out there. This is just kind of one more piece that you can put out there to try to help give Google the right information that you want showing up alongside of your business to help to influence that a little bit. Website and a few others here are really useful as well. So this is another good example where, you know, week to week, once a month, things change. Google still has the documentation out on their site about using a preferred site name. I wasn't able to find any examples where it was using that today. So even across the examples they have there, the Wikipedia or Google, seems like at the moment they were showing a lot of just domains in that green text there, where in the kind of bubble it says Google about company. In theory, you can actually define a short kind of friendly name for your site that it would use there. Another thing you can do within the website type is to define a site search function, and then that can help to influence whether that site links search box shows. That can show anyway. Google may decide that it's going to show that anyway for your site, even if you haven't done the website schema.org markup on your site, but that can help to maybe encourage it to do that. A couple other things that can be influenced through schema. So breadcrumb markup is really great. So that can influence some of the labeling in the results list. So you can see at the bottom of the examples there, rather than having the very URL structured look there, it has actually a friendly text preparing for procedures as that label. So that can help to give people a little bit more understanding of the content that they're going to be looking at. Ideally, that's based off of the breadcrumbs that appear on the page, kind of that path that somebody has taken through the site to get to that content. The site navigation element is one that I think is useful as well. So this is, you know, defining in your main navigation that is site navigation, and that each of those elements are part of that site navigation. There's nothing currently that I could find that Google is actually doing with this. I like it as a nice kind of overall hygiene of your website, just keeping things clean and making it clear to Google in the best possible way what the navigation is and how important that is. Seems like it might be worth looking at. For videos, if you're publishing videos on your site, one of the challenges with videos can be how do you get them indexed and how do you get them showing up in search results if you're also presenting them through more of a branded experience within your site. And so schema markup for video is one of the ways to accomplish that. It can help you to control the title and description that appears within the search results page and really help to tie, as in this example, you've got a video, but it's actually appearing rather than being a YouTube listing, it's actually within that site itself. And you can tell some thought has been put into the title and description there as well. Local business is a huge type here, and this is pretty important. So this covers things like physicians, medical offices, medical business. And this, like I said, about organization can help influence some of those things that we struggle with business listings, getting the phone numbers correct, the addresses correct. It can be kind of another data point to help influence that. This also becomes the parent entity. One of the things that you can put inside of a local business type is reviews. And so this becomes that parent entity that houses the reviews and the aggregated reviews as we're doing things like star ratings and wanting those to show up on the results page. Right now there is a preview available. So if you go in through the structured data testing tool, which I'll talk about a little bit, and test out a page that has local business on it, you can actually get a preview of a rich card. And we've got that example there of Dr. Nest showing up in a rich card preview. As far as I know, they're not actually displaying on search results pages, but it does kind of give you an indication that that may be coming down the road. So really thinking about getting ahead of the curve there, and how those things may show up if they make that rich card more generally available. Same thing with place actions. So this is out there today through some kind of exclusive pilot projects that Google is running with a few different organizations. One of those happens to be ZocDoc, which is an appointment scheduling company. And so for physicians that are using the ZocDoc service, when you Google them and you get that knowledge graph showing up, and they show up as a local business there, one of the things that you can do is actually start to make an appointment right through the Google search results page. You can choose what the procedure or what the reason for the visit is, and start to go into that process. So this gives you another sense of where things are headed down the road, is adding these actions. And like I said, Google wants it to be actionable information that they're displaying out there. So you're able to actually go in and buy those tickets, make that reservation, or actually make the appointments with the physician. So it's not available out to everybody today, but looking forward to when that does become part of general availability. Reviews, as I mentioned, the aggregate rating type is the one to look at here, and that becomes nested inside of those local businesses, but can have a huge impact on the click-through rate on your search results. As you can tell here in this example, having those 5 stars, 67 votes there, really makes it prominent, really reflects well, and it's not only there in that kind of organic listing, but over there in the local knowledge graph panel over on the right-hand side, they're actually pulling in reviews from across the web there. And so again, this is that, creating this document on the fly that doesn't exist, combining, there is no page out there that combines Gunderson's own reviews with Healthgrade's reviews in one place, but the user can see it right here within the Google search results. And then finally, events. So if you're hosting health and wellness events, this can be a great type to look at. Right now, it mostly gets rich snippets, although they say they support it for rich cards as well. And it just can help to add on to any of the listings. You see this really commonly across concerts and those types of events that are out there, but certainly something to explore if you're doing a lot of event marketing. If you're adding this type of code to your site, you want to become friends with Search Console if you aren't already. This is formerly Google's Webmaster Tools, how you can go out and monitor what's going on with the Google crawls on your site and the information it's finding. Within that tool, you can see the status of different types of structured data on the site, as well as rich cards that have been detected. And so you can get a sense of how many items it's finding, Google is finding, and if they're encountering any errors as they're parsing that information. So great tool to have to be able to go out and do that. And it actually links into the other really useful tool, which is Google's structured data testing tool. And this is a tool you can go out and put any URL in. So this is a great way as well to go look at some other sites. If you see something cool going on in the search results page, maybe throw that URL into the structured data testing tool and find out what they have going on, what kinds of schema.org entities do they have going on that page, how are they accomplishing whatever's going on. But it will actually break down all of the data and field by field what it's seeing within the page. And you can do this from a URL. You can copy and paste markup in there if you're doing some development and testing things out. It's a great tool to use as well. A few links here, and we share out the slides after this. So just some links in case you download the slides and want to be able to go out and find some of these things. So moving from that, I wanted to touch briefly before we run out of time here on social media metadata, and just think about what we're trying to do there as we're thinking about describing our content and putting all this metadata out there, focusing as well on some of the things. Sometimes this gets overlooked, thinking about social media. Why would we even do this? Really improving overall findability of content, improving the visibility of your content if it gets shared on a social platform. So what we're talking about here is metadata that can help take that listing. If somebody goes to a social site, they go on Facebook, share your page, Without any of that, they may get something that looks like that before shot there. So Facebook is going to go into the page and maybe take that page title, the description, the URL that it finds, and put that out there. You have the ability to control a lot of extra things. So by adding a little bit of metadata onto your page that's being shared, you can specify the image. You can decide to have a different headline that goes into Facebook than out there on the website. You can use a different description, and you can shorten up the URL. So overall, this is just an improved brand experience as people are sharing this on social. I'm sure a lot of us have had that experience where you go to share something, whether it's on social media or even on a tool like Slack that will actually pull in some of this information, or LinkedIn, and the image that goes along with the post just does not, you can't even figure out where it was on the page. It has picked something really random, and it just makes the whole experience really frustrating. So this can really help to help create a branded experience with content that people are sharing on social media. It can also help to connect a lot of your shares with things like Facebook domain insights. And so a note here is that you do need to register an app ID with Facebook in order to have those things connected, but then you're actually able to see some of those shares happening within your insights tool inside of Facebook. To give you a quick overview of what that looks like, there's three main types of metadata. Open Graph is the one that is really focused, is Facebook's contribution here, and used by Facebook, used by Pinterest for a couple of different types of pins, article and product pins, and used by LinkedIn. And it looks like that example on the right. So these are meta tags, HTML tags with particular property names and the content that you just fill in. Schema.org, as we've already talked about, is used predictably here by Google+. It will look first for Schema.org markup. If that doesn't exist, it'll fall back to Open Graph. Pinterest uses Schema.org for place, recipe, and movie pins. And so things are maybe trending a little bit that direction for some of the platforms towards Schema.org. Twitter has their own format that they use, and that looks like the lower right there. Very similar to the Open Graph where it's meta tags, but some slight nuance there to exactly how that comes together. Most of the time I would recommend using some sort of a tool to put these together, whether that's just a website with a generator, something like this mega tags, or a plugin or capability within your content management system that can help you to really piece these things together. You're also going to want to go out and validate these. And again, we'll show the slides afterwards, and so you can go out and check out all of the different validators for the different platforms. So key takeaways for today. We talked about what search engines want. They want good content. They want to have a good user experience for their users, really thinking about them as kind of the owner of that search experience. Thought about how search is evolving a little bit. We're not just looking for documents anymore, we're mapping the real world. Schema.org is the way that we can connect these things together. We've got multiple methods. It's a little bit in flux, but it's definitely got a lot of momentum going ahead. And we looked a little bit at social metadata and making sure that we're also thinking about those areas, particularly Open Graph and Twitter card being the things in addition to Schema.org. So my takeaways here, the key recommendations really would be to, just like you're doing today, keep aware of where things are headed. It's going to help you make those longer term decisions by knowing, what the search engines are up to, what they're trying to achieve, and why they're headed different directions, what they're trying to do with this knowledge graph, how they're trying to create new information or new presentations of information that don't exist today. Keep your corner of the web tidy. This is always a good recommendation. If you're out there today and have some need to clean up just page titles and descriptions, some of those basic elements within the page, just kind of chisel away at that and clean up what you have out there today, as at the same time that you're thinking about adding on and continuing to enhance things. This doesn't typically end up being a just rip the whole Band-Aid off, adopt it all at once kind of process. It's really something that most organizations are kind of just picking off as they have time and continuing to just improve their overall landscape within their site of metadata. And to that end, look at some of the strategic priorities you have going on, other projects. If you're putting a focus around physicians, that may be a great opportunity to weave in some of the physician markup and really tackle that area of the site as that project is going on. So kind of tag along with some of the other projects that are happening. So that can be a great way to improve your metadata and really boost your overall SEO. With that, we'll take a few questions here. I know we're kind of right up on time, but hang around for just a little bit here and see if we've got some questions that have come in. Looks like we've got a question here about rel canonical. And I didn't touch on that today. It was one of the things that I ended up cutting, but there's markup within the page where you can specify, and most folks have heard of canonical tags. If you have duplicate content or content that is substantially the same as another page out there on the web, lots of reasons that can happen. You want to use a canonical tag to indicate which of those Google should treat as the one true version of that content and sort of ignore the other. So the question here is, how can you make use of this safely if you have content that doesn't quite stand on its own as unique content? Maybe it is a little bit different, but it isn't totally unique. How can you best use the rel canonical? This is really where you're probably facing some challenges with the information architecture of that content, trying to figure out how to separate out some of those different types that I talked about earlier in order to be able to help make content a little bit more singular, a little bit more unique. Really what you're going to have to do is pick a winner out of those different pieces of overlapping or somewhat duplicated content. One of those is going to need to be the one true version that you're pointing the search engines to. And so finding an equitable way to do that, if that's across different parts of the organization, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but if there's that much duplication in content, it a lot of times leads back to the question, okay, why does there need to be separate content across these different parts of the organization? Where do we really want people to come in if they're coming in that front door? Is there one of these locations that speaks to the broader organization rather than maybe specific parts of the organization? A lot of questions to ask there around exactly what's going on with those pieces of content. But at the end of the day, the options are really either pick a winner or to make that content more unique in some way. Cool. Well, that looks like all the questions we have today. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Alex.
Great. Thanks for attending our webinar. As a reminder, please take this survey and tell us what you think. You can get our white paper, schema.org for the healthcare marketer, by answering yes to question 4. And in the ideas section of geonetric.com, you can find the rest of our white papers, webinars, and blog posts. And don't forget to register for next month's webinar, where David will discuss physician marketing and recent trends in consumer behavior. You can register for this and find out more about all of our upcoming webinars at geonetric.com/webinars. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.